Okay, we had a down day. And let me just bring this up closer. We had the Dow pretty much flat. It was up 33 points. The S&P was down 0.5%, almost 30 points lower, dropping below 6,059.83 and some change. NASDAQ was down 1.21%. The Russell was down 0.78%. The VIX was up 4.23%. The VIX is predicting an update tomorrow. There's an 85% chance of it, 15% chance it fails, based on the historical data. Moves greater than 10%. Towards the end of the session, President Trump is saying that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico will go forward. Remember, there was a pause on the tariffs with Canada and Mexico, and again, this is likely being used as a bargaining chip. President Trump's already gotten concessions, as I predicted would happen, and got right. I told you when those tariffs go into place, they're going to make immediate concessions, and they did. And again, the United States likely wants more concessions, but just something worth paying attention to. Now, again, I just want to say one other thing about I want to say this about the reciprocal tariffs. And before I do, again, when we had the tariffs with Canada and Mexico, the market gapped down on it and bottomed out. See the same thing if further concessions are made, and again, that is likely. Those tariffs were in place, a day and a half, and Mexico immediately caved, and Canada later that day. Likely going to see the same thing. So again, just keep that in mind. I think that we're going to rally surrounding the tax cuts and maybe some other catalysts going into the April tariffs. Now, be clear about this, and I posted this on social media on X, formerly known as Twitter, on Sunday, and very likely that the rally on the S&P is going to resume into April. April 1st has been highlighted as a deadline for agencies to complete their investigations and submit recommendations. The Commerce Secretary has indicated that studies would be ready by April 1st, 2025, allowing Trump to decide on action starting after April 2nd. And I put, however, the process doesn't mean the tariffs will automatically be imposed on April 1st. Instead, it's when the administration expects to have a detailed plan ready with implementation potentially following shortly thereafter, depending on Trump's decisions. But some reports that we've seen are suggesting that the tariffs could start as early as April 2nd. The exact timing could vary by country, and again, they could start at different times. They're talking about tariffs on the countries that have the most egregious tariffs on the United States and the large trade imbalances. Something worth paying attention to, but it's not necessarily going to start on April 1st is what I'm trying to say, but it could start shortly thereafter. We're going to get the CPI data on April 10th, the month of April. Historically, Bitcoin has rallied into March, peaking into late March or on into early April. The S&P is probably going to follow Bitcoin's lead. My latest Bitcoin video, I'll link it at the end of this one. I go through the seasonality on Bitcoin, and it's really a blueprint probably for where Bitcoin's going, and the market is probably going to follow. There's going to be an inflation freakout on all of this at some point in April, and Bitcoin gets its negative seasonality for the last 4 years between April and September. So I think you're going to probably see the same thing on the S&P 500. You might want to watch that video. It's a great chart. Great chart. Shared it with you before, but don't have time today. And just quickly, I'm still watching the Dow, candle of indecision on the Dow, slight gain today. Still watching to see if the Dow and the transports end up getting a divergence, as they so often do. We have this larger one here that could be marking a major top, but you might get one here in the most recent price action. We don't have one yet. Very well could still see one develop, so something we're paying attention to going forward. I talked about the Dow at great length and detail in the weekend update, my last video. We still have the VIX above the 50-period moving average. The VIX from Friday's price action is predicting we're going to have an update tomorrow. So again, as I told you earlier, we could go lower before that happens, which we have now done, but we're going to be watching to see if the VIX 85% prediction that we're going to have an update tomorrow, a bounce or a bottom. We'll see if that is correct. MACD is turning up. Well, last time we got that, we ended up having it mark a peak there. So we'll be watching to see what happens. Time you get it in positive territory and you start seeing the market sharply sell up. But we're at that major trend line of support, our 2023 trend line, directly below. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, then take a moment to support the channel. Take a moment to do that. I would really, really appreciate it. Let me know you want this information, you like this information by supporting the channel. I ask that because I don't want sponsors. I don't want to sell you a bunch of stuff. I would rather just have you look at the charts and have us talk about the charts rather than have to sell you something. So I choose not to go that route. They contact me. Sponsors contact me all the time. I don't take those offers. I turn them down. I just ask that you do what you can to help out. If you could take a moment to do that, follow the link below to take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. But if you can take a moment to support the channel today, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you. The NASDAQ, again, we had a failed breakout. I talked about this. There was a breakout here. There was no confirmation to that, no follow through. And we get this sharp reversal. NASDAQ taking out the 50, taking out this trend line. I talked about this trend line over the weekend. Again, I talked about the cloud of support. Remember, before the sell-off ever happened, I talked about this area down here. I talked about the gap up here. I talked about this area, the 100 period, and these lows being tested. We'll be watching the NASDAQ. Nvidia, will the next rally, or will Nvidia tank the NASDAQ? We'll be watching to see how it unfolds. But these divergences did play out with a failed breakout here on the NASDAQ, and now we're breaking the trend line here. So we'll be watching to see what happens in this area. Again, we get something bigger with the NASDAQ. And again, as I've said, NASDAQ may top before the S&P, so just keep that in mind. Broke to new highs, so we very well can now go to new highs. I talked about the weekly charts over the weekend. You can look at those weekly charts in those videos. I talked about this gap filling here, and below that we have that election gap at 20,227. This one's at 20,759. So just some levels we're watching with our 100 period, our cloud, now that we've broken the trend line here. The moving averages are still in a bullish arrangement, but they're starting to curl over, so we'll be watching to see what happens here. When NASDAQ broke the trend line from our recent January low, connecting the lows that we just looked at up close, which is from this January low right here, we broke that trend line, okay? And we now have, let me just, said it moved on me. Sometimes on this program, the trend lines move when you hit save on them. January low right here to the August low. We're now coming right to that trend line. So do we bounce off this trend line? Does the S&P bounce off its trend line? Does Bitcoin bounce off its trend line? And you'll see Bitcoin's approaching its trend line as well if you go watch my Bitcoin video at the end of this video. So again, going to be watching. And if we do, you've got these other trend lines I'm watching up here from the July peak and a possible parallel channel if we bounce right here, here in the daily time frame. If not, again, you've got the gap fill here. You got the gap fill down over here from the election right there. That's the election gap fill. So again, some levels to be watching. Should we break this level? We've got our 100 period moving average and these lows, as I mentioned previously over the weekend, and then again just a moment ago. The MACD now rolling over. Stochastic has been turning down. It's breaking below 50. The RSI is below 50. So again, what happens right here? And can we get back above that 50 period moving average? I get the Russell. I talked about the Dow over the weekend. I'll talk about the Russell today. Russell is slightly, hang on, my trend line moved on me here. Okay. The Russell is slightly breaching the trend line as we're now seeing the close from last week and this week. We're slightly breaching it and we're moving below 50. So the question now, I'm getting rejection off that 20. We did the same thing over here. Do we end up getting a bigger sell-off or do we buy a little bit more time? If we try to rebound and we're trying to form confirmation of a higher low or a divergence on the daily chart, if we can rebound, can we still come back up here, still get a lower high, in maybe a larger A, B, C type of a move here and then sell off? Certainly possible if the S&P can try to find a bottom right here and now. CD is still positive. It's bearish, but it's still positive. Do we buy more time? Again, I pointed out that they diverged back over here at the 2021 peak with the Russell and the 2022 peak in January of 2022 with the S&P. I don't think the S&P is peaked, so we might see the Russell try to bounce around the 200 here. Again, we're just breaching the trend line ever so slightly. We are testing our 200 again. Do we end up seeing something like this where we go, an A, B, C type of a move, still get a lower high, but then end up tanking and rally into April as well? Very well could be if we try to bounce around this 200 period, and again possibly form, if we take out this low a little bit, a divergence here or a confirmation of a higher low. Something worth paying attention to on the Russell. Now, having said that about the pause ending with the tariffs on Canada and Mexico come early March here, again, they're expected to have negotiations. So again, we'll be watching. This is, again, what I think is happening. This is the 15-minute chart. I told you about these divergences on the 15, the 30-minute, and the 60-minute chart. I told you about these divergences back on Wednesday. That was the 19th. And I told you, again, we were likely going to see a pullback based on the divergences. I was correct on that. Then this weekend, I laid out a couple different scenarios. And again, I've been talking about this scenario being the one I think is most likely. I think we're going to bottom this week in all likelihood, but I've given you some alternative scenarios for the Elliott wave count, but absolutely nailed it with the divergences here on these intraday charts here on the RSI and the MACD. But now we're forming another one. Today we got a bounce. And look at this. I drew this before it happened, posted it on X as it was starting to happen, but I had drawn it before. And again, this is my scenario right here that we have, again, this 5-leg push down. And I think that we've got that wave 3 completed now today, and then now 4. And now I think we're getting 5. And I think we're going to bottom out at where? The trend line that I've been talking about. Now, again, I could be wrong about that, but I have the guts. Very few people have the guts to tell you what they think. I actually have the guts to tell you. Showing you what could happen if I'm wrong about that, but I've given you a couple of different scenarios, and I told you the two I thought were most likely. This is a scenario that I think is happening right now, but look at this. I think we got this divergence right here, and I think we're forming another one. And again, here on the 15-minute chart with the RSI, I think we're forming another one here. So I think we could see a bottom on Tuesday or Wednesday, but I think could see it on Tuesday. That's very, very possible. I think this could come to a conclusion tomorrow. VIX is predicting an update tomorrow, 85% chance. And we had a down day today on the S&P 500. But look at this beautiful count right here from the diversions that we talked about. Look at this beautiful count, 5-leg push lower. Okay, and I think you complete the 5 right here, completing the C wave, and I think that completes this wave 2, which is I think our second wave of our subwave 3 that I'm looking at. So we've got these minute and micro waves forming, and that's what they're officially called, but they're just the smaller waves in that larger subwave 3. That's really what it comes down to. So I don't want to confuse you. I'm looking at the larger subwave 3 count, which I think this is the second wave of that. I think it'll be followed by a wave 3 in that subwave 3. Take a look. Same thing here, 30-minute chart. I told you about these divergences before they played out. This is why I was telling you we're going to get a sell-off, but I think we're completing a 5-leg push lower. Their 30-minute chart, beautiful diversions like the 15-minute chart. Same thing on the MACD, but I think you're forming these divergences. Look at the RSI, look at the MACD. I think you're going to bottom probably tomorrow, maybe by Wednesday, but probably Tuesday. I think you're going to see a bottom here. See an up day, we could drop and then rebound back up. We did that with recently with the CPI data. We did that recently with the tariff sell-off there surrounding the last time around with the tariffs on Mexico and Canada. So again, could it be that we get all this delayed going into April, and that allows us to have, several weeks of a rally, and then even if we have the Trump administration getting the data on the tariffs by April 1st, they may be delayed. And we have several weeks here where we could see this completion of the blow-off top, in my opinion. But again, the sell-off that I predicted up here with these divergences, I think is now coming to a conclusion down here, in my opinion. And I think that'll happen at the trend line of support from our 2023 trend line, which I've been talking about at great length and detail. I talked about it at great length and detail over the weekend. The trend line where I used it to predict the January bottom. Remember our January 9th and 10th, I told you we were going to bottom the following week. We bottomed that Monday on the 13th. The very next day after the 10th, I said that again. Bottomed the very next day. We were going to bottom surrounding that inflation data and get a rally ahead of Inauguration Day to continue because I was expecting a continuation of the election rally surrounding Inauguration Day with the tax cuts. I think it all goes together. The election, Inauguration Day, now the tax cuts, and then we're going to get this off. You know, Wall Street, they love Trump's economic policies. They love the deregulation. They love that stuff, but they hate his tariffs because they believe that they cause inflation. There's concerns about a trade war. How do we know? How do we know? You know, and by the way, you know, everybody is saying Trump's going to cause a trade war. And again, I'm no fan of Trump's tariffs, but the people, he's just trying to level the playing field because the people that are guilty of even more egregious tariffs than Trump are other countries like Europe. European countries have worse tariffs on the United States than the United States has on their products. How do we know they're not going to come to the negotiating table? And again, if they would just remove the tariffs, the United States wouldn't apply any. Level the playing field. We'll see what happens. Be other delays. We'll see what happens. But I think, again, you're going to get this rally, and I think we're going to bottom here probably Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. You can have the Nvidia earnings. I told you we could pull back with Nvidia and then maybe try to rally. See if Nvidia drags the market down. If it helps give us the next rally with Nvidia. And I've talked about that at great length of detail in the weekend video. I featured the Nvidia charts. This is what I think is happening. Again, on the 30-minute chart, on the 5-minute chart, these smaller waves, I think, are making a 5-leg push lower that I think is going to probably create a bottom on Tuesday. Complete these divergences. So that's what I think is happening. But I think we're going lower. Hear what I'm saying. I think we're going lower, but then I think we're going to rebound. And again, that news from Trump about the tariffs with Canada and Mexico towards the last part of the trading session there. I drew this out for you over the weekend. Pretty close. I was pretty close. we were expecting, and I moved the one thing. I had the wave 3 going down further, but I had to get it out of the way so you can see it here. But I kept the wave 4. Got the wave 3 right. Got the wave 4 here, but again, we fell short of that level. Again, just ballpark level here. Expected a rally, we got it. Now I'm expecting a little bit lower. So I'm going to move this. Again, this is what I think is going on. If we go and we take out 59.23, 59.24, rounding up here, this low right here, which is the starting point of wave 1, and my line moved on me. Hang on. Okay. This low is the beginning of this wave 1, and then we have an A and a B, and now potentially a C to complete wave 2. Okay. We cannot go below this low right here. And if we do, it will invalidate my count. So I expect you're going to get a bottom right here. Okay, and then I think we're going to resume the advance, and you're going to get this big move up for wave 3. You're going to be starting your third of the third, where if we are, as I believe, in our subwave 3, then you have now 1, and then this A, B, C for 2, and now you're going to get the third wave in our subwave 3, which is in the larger minor wave 5. And again, a lot of chopping here, and I think we're getting ready to break out here now. And I think, again, this low could hold if this scenario plays out. Now, again, I have other scenarios. If we take this low out, it will invalidate this current count that I have. This is what I think is going on. Could I be wrong? Yeah, but I have the guts to tell you what I think. I think Tuesday or possibly on into Wednesday, we can carve out a bottom here, okay? And again, some of those divergences are under construction there in the 15-minute time frame and 30-minute time frame, and very well could give us a bottom in the next 2 trading sessions. The VIX is predicting an update tomorrow. It could be wrong. There's a 15% chance it'll be wrong, but again, we'll be watching to see how it unfolds. I think your histogram here on the MACD is going to tick back down and form a divergence, and then I think the MACD will turn back up, and I think you're going to try to bottom here above 59.23.93 or that 59.24 area. 60-minute chart here of the S&P 500. Now, if we come down here, I think you're going to hit the trend line. Right there in this area is our trend line in the daily time frame. Let's take a look. Before I do, I just wanted to tell you, again, remember last Tuesday when I was talking about those divergences and they began to play out, I talked about the 5-minute chart dropping below the 200, and then we rallied back up to the 200, and I told you, hey, at the 200 here and at the 50 here on the 15-minute chart. Remember that? And I told you again, suggesting a bigger decline, but the divergences nailed it. 15 and the 30-minute chart, and again we drop below that 5-minute 200 period moving average there. And again, when you're below the 200, the 50 gets below it. Look at the 50, it's been below it, and again, bad stuff's happening. In order to turn it around, we had to get back above that 200 and be able to stay above it. We got rejection at it right there. So again, but even here in the 5-minute time frame, again, it looks like a larger divergence could be under construction here if we get another push lower and then try to bottom out. So I think you got a good shot that we're going to try to put in some kind of short-term bottom around the trend line on the daily chart on Tuesday, possibly on Wednesday, one of the two, which I've talked about in the weekend update. Here it is. This is a trend line. This is going back to, again, the August low, connecting the August low, going back and connecting this level right here. We're just below it. Right here, from the 2023 trend line, we actually violated it ever so slightly. Now this trend line, I've just taken it from this low right here at the January bottom and right here. But if we go back further, it's just slightly higher than that. But I think that you could hit this trend line right here. And again, I've marked that accordingly. And again, is what I think is going on, as we've talked about coming down and filling the gap from the election and hitting the trend line from the 2023 low. And I told you January 9th and 10th, I thought we'd get that bottom. We did. I told you we'd rally. And then up here, I told you, hey, we're going to pull back and back test. What happened? We came back and we back test. Right here, when we went lower, we didn't. And I told you we rallied up. Told you we formed that bear flag. We were still going to do it. I was correct on that. Here I told you I wasn't sure if we were going to try to take that low out or test it and get a higher low. We tried to get a higher low right here, but it looks like, to me, in my opinion, that we have an ABC move. I think that we did bottom there with our first subwave of, our second subwave, I'm sorry, of minor wave 5. I think minor wave 4 finished here. Remember what everybody was saying? We got a head and shoulders, and I told you it's a fake pattern. I told you, I believed we were in minor wave 4. That was correct. And I told you, I thought it evolved into a bull flag. Bitcoin did the same thing. Go look at my Bitcoin charts. It's absolutely incredible. Bitcoin's doing the exact same thing. Both Bitcoin right now and the S&P are moving towards trend lines of support. They're probably both going to bounce off of them. So I don't think we go much further. Now, I could be wrong. I have other Elliott wave counts that I've showed you. If this one is invalidated, if we take out this low right here, it will be invalidated. But and again, you could still have, rather than 2 finishing here, it could be over here, or you could get something uglier. My guess is that this is the count that's probably most likely. Does that mean it's for sure that it's going to play out? No. Again, I'm just telling you what I think. That 2023 trend line is just going to be tested again, and then we're going to go up, and we're going to get this wave 3 here. We have the wave 1, the wave 2, and then now we've started this wave 3, and I think we get the smaller waves in wave 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to complete the wave 3, the subwave 3 there. Then you get your subwave 4 and 5, and I think that's going to take us up into this trend line here, and I think you'll see a top there, and I think that's going into April. I'm telling you, Trump may not start those tariffs immediately. He may, he'll have the information on his desk on April 1st. That doesn't mean they're going to start immediately. There could be a delay on them. That with the tariffs with Canada and Mexico, Trump, when he first got on Inauguration Day, he delayed it until February 1st. So could we see something similar to that? Yeah, but we're going to get the CPI data. This is what I think's happening. And again, now everybody's saying, oh, no, we've topped. Showed you the sentiment is very bearish here. The herd is bearish. So again, we're probably going to bottom. I showed you the fear greed index over the weekend. The fear greed index, I think, is pulling back to validate a higher low. It hasn't broken above 50 with these highs. It's probably going to. It doesn't have to move to a new high above 75 greed index, but again, to form a larger divergence with our previous peaks, probably going to push above 50. Seeing a top on fear to neutral levels, fear greed index, and we've seen a top form on very negative sentiment. We're probably going to bottom here and go higher. And then when we get up here, they're going to not think it's a top. They're scared right now. The herd is scared. And then when we get up here, they're not going to be fearful. Very, very bullish at tops. They get very, very bearish at bottoms. That's why I knew this was a bottom over here. I was sure it was a bottom when I told you, fill that election gap and bounce off the 2023 trend line. I think we're going to bounce off that 2023 trend line again. I have other scenarios if we don't, but again, just telling you what I think. Signals have done a really good job of knowing these turns. I think the chop and slop in here is just getting these 1 and 2s, and then I think we're about to finish the consolidation and go higher. I think Bitcoin's going to do the same thing. Go watch that Bitcoin video. It is well worth your time to pay attention to what's going on with Bitcoin. It is the blueprint for the stock market right now. Had a short-term decoupling, but they're both now pulling back, and Bitcoin's wrapping it up, and S&P's playing catch-up in this larger pullback. But this is what I think is going on right here. We have this rising wedge into this larger channel on the weekly chart that I've talked about. Showed you other scenarios. Again, I could tell you what I think, but that doesn't mean it's going to be correct. Now, the signals have made some amazing calls. But Elliott wave, it's speculation, and I'm trying to couple that with my indicators. Here's another possibility, and I think that this is my second choice right here, is that if we end up breaking the trend line, if we end up breaking it, then the wave 2, the subwave 2, never finished over here, and you have this A, B, and then C type of a move here. That, again, then we go on our way and get the 3, the 4, and the 5, and that in this scenario, the other scenario, subwave 3 has already begun and started, and we're getting our first 2, micro waves there, or waves. Here, subwave 2 never finished, and that's this scenario. Again, this would be an alternative count for me. I think the other count is more likely. This is my second choice. The other choice I had, it was invalidated. We took out this low, so that's no longer the third choice. We have 3 possibilities. The first one I showed you that I think is happening. This is my second choice. The third one I think is less likely, but still a possibility if we get a bigger sell-off. Keeping this in mind, here we come back and we take out this low, and you've got your ABC move to complete the wave 2. The other one, we're getting already in the subwave 3. Here, it's not yet completed, subwave 2. Here's the third possibility. I think it's less likely. Don't want to rule it out. If we start invalidating other counts, then this is certainly a possibility. If we take out the 2023 trend line and we move back to try to fill the CPI gap from back over here when we gapped higher after the January bottom. Remember I told you that we were going to bottom that week with the inflation data? We did, and we bounced off the trend line. We had the CPI gap there at 58.43. So I'm looking at these levels right here. If we invalidate those other counts, I think this is much less likely to happen. I think we're going to get the final blow off top, and then I think we're going to get a bunch of volatility. This would have us in wave 3, minor wave 3 over here, and minor wave 4 never finished. And you got an A, a B, and then now you're going to get this C move. I think it's less likely, but it's still a possibility, and that would take us back closer to our 200 period moving average. So this is a count that I'm looking at, and then we get the minor wave 5. So this count says minor wave 4 never finished. Again, it is possible. I think it's less likely, and it's my third choice out of the 3 choices that I have now presented to you. What I think will happen, I think we're about to bottom or surrounding this trend line in our 100 period. Notice that 100 period, the pink line is right there. Here we just dropped below it, got back above it. Here we bounced off of it. Here at the January low, we violated it just a little bit and bounced off of it. Again, Bitcoin's at that 100 period moving average. It's just below it right now. It follows the 100 period moving average, and really the S&P 500 does as well. Live it, love it, learn it. Just quickly, if I show you this other chart of the rising wedge, going back, this trend line goes back to the 2023 low. This is why I predicted that we would bounce off of it the following week after the 9th and 10th of January, and we did on the 13th. We hit this trend line right on the nose. We slightly violated it. So again, right here with the violation, with hitting this level, we're right at that level right now. If we take the trend line from the low here in August, it's a little bit lower. So do we take the trend line a little bit below this level and connect this point and this point here, which is what we really have the trend lines I showed you up close a moment ago. So again, similar to the angle connecting this point to this point, very, very close. So, and again, if we exclude this low, and let me do that so you can see, exclude this low, but connect the low here from 2023 to the low here, because we slightly breached that trend line, then again, we're just slightly above that level right there. Do you see what I'm talking about? And again, I've also connected this low here in August to this low, and it's coming in right around that same area. So those are the trend lines that I'm really looking at, I think directly below, and then I think we're going to bounce and go up into this level, up into this trend line right here. So I think you have this massive rising wedge. I've thinned it out right here so you can see it, but we had a failed breakout. I talked about it on the NASDAQ and the S&P. We tried to get above, we did get above that December high, failed here, failed here, failed here. We finally got it above it here, but then we failed to break above the January high. We did, but it wasn't a decisive breakout. 1 point above this level is not really a decisive, convincing breakout. And then we got the confirmation bar after that. Well, it failed. Even if it is confirmed, it failed. You never got the follow through to the upside, okay? I don't know how convincing a 1 point close above this January high, I don't know if that's a convincing confirmation bar. If this was a confirmation bar, we never got the follow through is what I'm trying to say. So again, because that 1 point was not really convincing. So here we're selling off. We're now below the 50 period. The 10 and 20 are pointing down. The 10 is still above the 20. I talked about the 100 period moving average. I talked about that trend line, the 2023. I talked about the support area here with their cloud. So again, I think that you got a shot at carving out a bottom again above this low right here at 59. What did I say it was earlier? 59.23 or 24 or whatever it was. I think you're going to carve out a bottom right here, maybe at our 100 period moving average right there. And then I think you're going to begin to turn back up and resume the advance. And I think you're building momentum to clear this January high and now our February peak right here. And again, peaked with negative sentiment above 40, and we peaked here with a neutral reading on the fear greed index, never having turned to greed and never getting above the 50 level on the fear greed index. I think you're likely going to do it. So I think you're going to try to carve out a bottom here, in my opinion. MACD's rolled over. We'll be watching to see what happens with all of that going forward. Stochastics pushing down. We'll see if we try to find a bottom here this week. I think you got a good shot at it. I think you got a very good shot at it Tuesday or Wednesday ahead of the Nvidia earnings. What is that? After the bell on Wednesday, I believe, the 26th. Could Nvidia give us the next rally in the market? We'll see. It was down 3% today. And again, I told you, again, we were turning off of that trend line. We were filling the gap. I talked about this. Remember on Wednesday when I was telling you, forming those negative divergences? I was warning you last week about the Nvidia chart filling the gap and halting at this trend line. We've had this turn off of it, down another 3% today. So again, we dropped 26.5%. We rebound back up to fill the gap. If we sell off here, can we bounce and try to break out through this level? Possible bull flag here. And again, I've talked about coming back up to this trend line right here. I've talked about coming up to the trend line in the weekly time frame. Went through Nvidia in the weekend update in great length and detail. I'll refer you to my weekend videos because I covered it in great detail. We're pulling back ahead of earnings that maybe we rally with them. The S&P bounce off that trend line. MACD's breaking into the positive region. Even if it rolls over, could it confirm a higher low here surrounding our 200 period moving average? Here's the rising wedge on the daily chart inside the channel in the weekly time frame outlined here in blue. Now again, remember, we violated the trend line ever so slightly in January, bounced off of it as I thought, but we violated it just a little bit. Here, I'm still including the same trend line boundaries here and slightly violating that level. We are hitting it in our 20-week moving average. As I said, could it be we're now connecting the 2023 low here in late 2023 to this low right here? And again, it's just a little bit lower than that. and that would be in keeping with the trend line from the August low to the January low and just slightly lower. So I think you're going to bottom out there, and then I think you're going to get this final push into these trend lines, the upper boundary of the rising wedge and the upper boundary of the channel. And then I think the stock market is going to complete the blow off top. Then I think it's going to drop 20% as it has in the past at the last two bear markets to kick off the new bear market. And then I think the Fed will panic and do an emergency cut. We'll start getting jumbo cuts out of the Fed. They're telling the recession they're telling us isn't going to happen. It's going to happen. This is what I think is going to happen right here. And again, I believe we're in minor wave 5. I don't think it's done yet, but I think that it's going to come to a conclusion, and that could be March on into April. It could be surrounding the tariffs. We're going to have an inflation freak out, as I've said. I don't like Trump's tariffs. I don't like Europe's tariffs. I don't like anybody's tariffs. But the tariffs don't cause inflation. It doesn't matter what I think. Wall Street believes that. It's nonsense, but Wall Street believes it. Going to likely give us the inflation freak out. So again, these divergences that are forming, multiple point divergences, I don't think it's done. I think you're going to try to bottom. And could it be that we rally with the tax cuts? The line for that is March. I don't know if they do an extension on that or not, but again, we'll be watching. I think the 2017 tax cuts could be part of the rally, maybe some other catalyst as well.